Shut up and sit down.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. This one is a recap of our Hunting Beast Scouting Workshop. Just want to say real quick thanks to Dan for having us over there and putting on, just a great event. If you guys get a chance to check out any of the seminars or the workshops that Dan puts on, definitely, we say it a bunch in the podcast, but if you get a chance, definitely check it out over at the Hunting Beast forum. That's usually where you can find most of the information on there, and they seem to be kind of last minute, where it would seem like you can't plan them out a year in advance because they don't know about the weather. This one was in a blizzard the day before. The Saturday one, it was nice and sunny and everything, and this one was, just snowing and blowing the whole time, but it was great. So this is just our perspective on the workshop and kind of our takeaways from it and how we're going to implement it into our scouting and our seasons going forward. I did do quite a bit of video. I'm going to put together that video. I'm not sure. I don't know how much there's going to be to gain from it. Anytime that Dan talks, there's tons of great information that you can get from it. But what I found is while I was videoing, I kind of wasn't paying attention. So I got kind of the higher points, and it's driven by questions. So I'll put it together and see how it comes out. But just a quick side note, I'm using that Panasonic Lumix FC300, and it literally had 2 inches of snow on it the entire day, and was constantly blowing snow off of it and everything, and it held up just fine. Worked great. The video turned out good. So just a little side note on that. And just a couple updates. If anybody is going to be over at the Outdoor Rama in Novi at the end of this month, we'll be there hanging out in the tethered booth all weekend, helping them out, kind of showcasing the new Phantom that they've got out. And so stop by and see us. We'll be over there Friday afternoon, Saturday, and then all day Sunday. So for most of the weekend, we'll be over there. So stop by, say hi, and we'd love to meet you. And that's kind of all I got for the intro. Thanks again to our Patreons. We're going to be giving away at the end of this quarter the Scouting series by Jason Samkoviak, as well as some other stuff that I'm still working on. So, but we'll get that out to you. And I've got some other things to give away to our Patreons here coming up. If you want to check out that, you can go to patreon.com/Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And, we really do appreciate them. They're the supporters that allow us to take trips over there, like to go to this seminar and things like that. And we really appreciate them following along and kind of supporting the show. And we appreciate all of our listeners. So if you get a chance, leave us a review. Let us know what we can do better. And tell someone else about the show. This, maybe you didn't know that they had these seminars. Point them to this podcast and say, hey, check this out. Maybe we should do this next year or something like that. But follow along with us on Instagram, Facebook, and look for the videos coming out on YouTube. And thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode. All right, everybody. We are back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. We are driving home from Wisconsin from the Dan Infault Scouting Workshop. And it snowed about 6 or 8 inches today. So road conditions are
not ideal.
So if you hear a big crunch and some screaming, or if we die, honey, I love you. But no, so we're just going to try and get this done while it's fresh on our mind. So we drove over so it's Sunday. We drove over Saturday night. It's about a 5.5 hour drive for us. And then we just slept in the parking lot. And I didn't think it was too bad. The drive over last night was fine. Yesterday, the weather was great for their scouting workshop. And it was a pretty clear drive. And even we got here about 4 a.m. And it was just maybe starting to snow a little bit. And then it basically snowed all day. So probably 6 inches of snow or so, would you say?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So that was, I don't know. Do you think it hindered the workshop at all?
No, not really. I mean,
yeah, it was pretty cold.
Definitely cold, windy, but you can definitely see why they call him the hunting beast, because Dan's out there all day with just a ball cap on, no gloves, a vest, freaking sleeves rolled up. When we rolled into the parking lot this morning, it was 17 degrees. So I know I had like 2 pair of pants on, 2 pair of socks, 2 coats, and I was still pretty cold, but it was worth every minute of it.
Yeah, I know last night it was like 17 degrees when we got here. So I don't know. I mean, it's 30 degrees now.
Yeah.
So it heated up throughout the day. But so John, I feel like with myself and I feel like sometimes I always get you on these like harebrained things where you're like, what are we going to do this for? Or who is this we're talking to? Or, what now? What? So, when I told you about this, like, 'cause I've been trying to go to this thing for like the last 3 years, but it's always just been inopportune time with like my wife being out of town or something like that. So this year when it came up and I was free, like, hey, do you want to go? And, you're like, yeah, sure. But I mean, I guess what were your expectations going into it?
Well, after we had him on the podcast the last time, and we talked about it then, and I was like, yeah, I definitely wanted to go. And when you brought it up, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go. And I was excited to put. I know you've got the marshland, scouting DVD of his, and I haven't seen that one yet, but I've watched quite a few of his videos and listened to his podcast. And so, throughout this last season, we've kind of been, bouncing ideas off each other and, scouting different areas and, trying to put it all together. Well, today I think it was kind of like not an aha moment, but like a accumulation of what we've been trying to learn, and then seeing like his actual hunting spots. And we'll get into all that, but I was definitely, it was better than I expected.
And what did you expect? I mean, I guess what were you thinking? Because, I mean, you're just kind of coming in to basically look at a spot that you can't hunt, right? So, I mean, what?
Right. Well, I mean, I really didn't. I didn't really form an idea of what to expect. I was obviously we're going to go walk through the marsh, and he's going to show us his how to look at beds or look for beds and where to look for them. But the way he broke down this property, which was a large, quite large property, definitely break it down and eliminate spots right off the bat. And I know I did a ton of scouting this last fall, hunting scouting, and I know I ended up wasting a ton of time after just going through this, But it also kind of, like I said, it helped. It put in perspective of the spots I did find, and I seen deer movement and out in the marsh and everything. I didn't get as aggressive as he, Of course, I didn't do the scouting preseason or late season, but now, guaranteed, when I get home, my next free day, I'm going to be up walking these marshes and finding the beds where where I've pinned them on Onyx or where I think they might be. I'm going to go out and verify it.
One of the things that I noticed was that, when I watch his videos and his hunts and things like that, I find it really hard to relate sometimes. I'm like, oh, we don't have that. It doesn't look exactly like that. But in reality, and one of the guys that was at the workshop today, he said it. He said, the hunting public talks about stem count and just the amount of basically like thickness of the vegetation.
Right, the ground cover.
So if you just replace, cattails with grass and shrubbery or whatever, it's very similar to some of the areas that I've hunted. And looking at it, it's a lot more similar than I guess I realized. And one of the things for me is I guess I didn't really know what to expect other than, we were going to go out and, so listening to Dan on a podcast or talking to Dan on a podcast or his videos or anything like that is a great bit of information. But getting to spend time with him and just, you couldn't have like a more, he would spend as much time with you as you wanted to and talk about, basically whatever. How long did we spend just sitting after we ate our meal, just talking about, hunting in general and dumb shit, right?
Good 3 hours almost, wasn't it? Or that's 5:40. Yeah, almost 3 hours.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I guess I didn't expect. Not that I didn't expect that he would take the time, but, just being like, just like a regular dude,
Right.
Just, and his perspective on hunting, we talked about, just killing deer, turkey hunting, all different things. But then that perspective of, maybe your area doesn't hold that caliber of deer, so you have to, kind of take what you can get. They say the number one thing that you need to kill a 150 is a 150, right?
Right.
So
you can't kill what's not there.
So reading that, now one thing that I was surprised about was, when you look at, I guess my favorite part of this, or like the takeaway was, when we were walking into all those spots, we're passing all of these big runways and, some rubs and things like that. There was no scrapes or anything visible. But all of the things that were over, that he just walks right past, and other things where I would see terrain features come together that I'd be like, well, I would imagine this would be the spot. And we're sitting in a spot where he would hunt, and he's explaining why, that isn't important in this particular scenario,
Yeah, that it definitely shed some light on, he's got so much experience. He's forgot more than, what we ever thought we knew. But, another part of it too is like he brought us to his actual hunting spots. The first spot we went to is one of the last videos he just posted. Like he showed us right where he was sitting, right where the deer came, why he was sitting there, and broke it all down. Right off the bat. So that right there, it's one thing to have a guy tell you how to hunt, right? Or give some information on hunting and their ideas, but then to have the hunting beast himself show you his spots and why he hunts there and where he's hunted in the past, and like what didn't work, and it was just invaluable.
Well, and so many guys that were at the scout seminar or whatever, it just kept coming up about validating. That was one of the things, like at the end he says, what was your favorite part of the thing, or what did you take away, what were the important high points? And one of the overwhelmingly repeated things was validation, right? So like you might look at Onyx, or you might scout a spot and be able to look at it and say, okay, well, this is it. And you go there, and on that particular day, you don't see anything, or it doesn't pan out. it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not the right spot. If you've got the sign saying that there's a big deer in there, it could just be that I wasn't there that day. He said, there's not that many. He said there's just as many sits where he goes in there and doesn't see anything also.
Right.
And I think getting that sort of, again, like, I guess if you were to equate it to baseball, and batting average, like you get to see that all the time. So you don't even think about it when your favorite player strikes out or whatever, goes 0 for 5, because he's got another game, another whatever. In the hunting world, you're trying to maximize those opportunities, obviously, but even the best hunters in the world, they go out and don't see anything sometimes also. And I think that's something that we forget, because social media tells us that everybody kills a 140, that you got to pass on every buck. And, so you're going out there trying to essentially level up and get better and hunt bigger deer and do all of that sort of thing. And then you don't maybe see anything, or you're not successful. It doesn't mean that you weren't in the right spot,
Right.
John's passing cars on the right here in a blizzard, so forgive him if he's not.
Yeah, we got one lane to drive in.
So how is this going to change the way that what is your main takeaways or whatever? How are you going to utilize this for the upcoming seasons?
Well, for one, I'm going to do more preseason scouting, like starting now. That's, I did a ton of, like I said, I did a ton of in-season scouting last year, but I didn't want to go in and bump stuff, and, where now going out and I asked him a question, like right now, going out basically as a greenhorn and looking for these beds and stuff out in these marshes, and looking for the bigger trees on the transition points or transition lines, and looking for points going out into the marsh. Right now, we could walk on the water basically. We're out in the marsh, we're walking on the ice, it's froze over good. Then we get out there, and yeah, you can tell like the grass or the cattails is kind of beat down or whatever, but you can't really tell that it was a bed. And so I asked him, I'm like, how do you know that this is a bed? He's like, well, I know because of my experience here, but if you wait until a little bit later when everything starts to thaw out, you'll be able to see, because it'll be matted down. You'll actually see where the deer are bedding. So even though, right now I go out and say I go out into my spot, that marsh I hunted quite a bit this year, I have an idea where they were bedding, but I can go out there now that it's froze, and I can look for that sign. Okay, there's no vegetation up. It's matted down, but I can't really see a bed. But then I can go back again and validate it. Where if I go out there and sure there's a tree there, but there's no mound and all the grass and stuff is still sticking up through the snow, well, then that's going to be like, well, that probably wasn't a bed then. Of course, Michigan right now, we've got some of the highest water levels we've had in years. So a lot of the swamps and, there's that used to be high ground are now underwater. And like he said, the deer are not going to bed. They're not going to lay down in standing water. They're going to go find somewhere that's dry. But
so one of the questions that I had asked him, and because he talked about, confidence in your area. So, all these guys, we've talked about it with Western hunters, we've talked about it with the hunting public, we've talked about it with Dan Info, Jason Zamkowiak. If they're not confident in a spot, they'll get down and move. They're not going to waste their time. Their time is too valuable, right? So that's one of the things when he was talking about, maybe doing an observation sit, maybe doing maybe backing off and kind of observing. Well, the question that I asked was, how do you observe, not burn out a spot in some of these spots that are just so tight or that are so specific? You're not going to walk, an hour through waist deep cattails to go observe a spot. And he said, well, observing doesn't necessarily mean sitting in a tree stand. So if he doesn't have time to hunt, he'll go drive around and check tracks. And when we talked to Joe Rentmeester, he was talking about the same thing, about just going around and checking the tracks before work, after work, on his lunch, whenever he could. Or just glassing, and looking where these bucks are, shining, all of these different things, so that he knows if there's a buck in the area that he wants to kill, or probably more importantly, if there's not.
Right.
And so that allows him the confidence to say, if I was here, or this deer keeps showing up here, then this is where I would go. So I thought that was interesting, because that's one of the things that I need to work on, and I'm going to plan on working on, is not so much like trying to find hunting areas, although I think this probably goes hand in hand, but I'm going to try to find like target animals, or find a couple good deer in the areas that I hunt. So I think one of the things that I got like messed up on, or like my perspective got skewed, was I was too busy looking at, I guess maybe not too busy, maybe I was
too focused,
managing my time. I was saying, well, I need to focus on finding these spots.
Right.
So I'd find the spot, but it didn't matter if there was the big buck sign there, because I just thought, well, this is a spot that's away from people, that has all of these features, but never was locating that deer in that area, or a target animal. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you actually found a big deer that you were kind of going in after, but it wasn't like John. I don't think we talked about this on the podcast. I think John and I talked about it just ourselves. But like, I don't have the obsession to pursue these deer. I don't know. I don't even know if it's even as much as I should. Seems like a terrible way to say it. Like, I should care more about killing big bucks. But it just doesn't, that's not what drives me. What drives me to hunt is to be out in the woods, to figure out deer, and to try to,
put yourself in a position
to
kill one.
But it doesn't, I guess I'm still in my old mindset of, well, I'm going to shoot whatever comes by. I'm going to put myself in an area where I hope a big one comes by. They're better areas than I used to be, but I'm not saying I hope this big one comes by, or the one that made that sign comes by. You know what I'm saying?
And that's kind of like his progression that we talked about afterwards at the restaurant. He's like, at first he was just a stone cold killer. He wanted to kill everything. And then it got to the point, okay, well, I've killed them. Now I want to kill a buck. And then he killed a bunch of bucks. Then it's like, okay, well, I want to kill a bigger buck. And then with his progression, he got to the point where I want to kill the biggest buck. And now he's at the point where he's done all that. And now he's like, he said he's like, he would rather do this kind of stuff and help other hunters, young hunters, like up their game and show them how to go about it, which is, I'm not at that point. Obviously I don't have the knowledge to do that. I'm pretty confident I can go out, find deer and kill deer. And, I see deer, but like what you're saying, I haven't put the time in to go out, find a big buck and be confident enough. Like, all right, I know he's bedded here. I know why he's here, and I know when I'm going to go in and have the best opportunity to kill that buck. I did a little bit of that, preseason. I did find a dandy buck, one of the best bucks I've seen in years in Michigan, shining, which is another tool that he uses. And kind of, we talked about it. I don't think it was on the podcast, but we talked about it like, all right, I found this deer. It was on private fields and stuff, but there's a big chunk of public around. It had marsh. It had like all the key features like he talked about. And, I shined him before the season. I was gone for a couple weeks. Then by the time I got back and started getting into that, spot, it was, I think it was too late. Either people had been in there, or I might even got in there too far and bumped him. Now when I get home, I'm going to go out there and scout that spot and try to find his, bedroom. And then I'll come back next year if he's still around. If he's not, there's going to be another one in there. That's what that's another thing he talked about was if there's a big buck in the area, there's a reason why he's there. And once you kill that one, another one's going to move into that area, most likely.
Yeah, and in that progression, I think is an important note to touch on because, no matter who's listening to this podcast, it's important to keep that perspective is like what makes you happy as a hunter and what makes and I guess
what drives your
I was going to say the why, right? So why are you doing this? Are you doing it because like for me, like I said, it's just fun. Like I enjoy it. I enjoy the camaraderie. I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy the pursuit. And yeah, everybody likes to kill a big buck or whatever. But I'm not to the, I guess I'm not to the point yet where I'm frustrated that I'm not killing these bucks. Like last year, like I said, I got in on a whole bunch of rack bucks, but I didn't have the drive or the anger, the concern, the frustration, however you want to say it, to be like, all right, damn it. Like now I'm going to go back in there and I'm going to kill him tomorrow because he did this. This is what I think he did, and I don't know if that makes me a bad deer hunter, if, whatever. I mean, cause I had a ball and I'm not like pissed, like, oh man, I was so close, because I think so many people get like down on themselves if they don't.
Yeah, with social media and everything now, that you got this pressure on you. You think, like you're saying, everyone's got to go out and kill a big buck in order to be, to be happy. Well, for one, I know one thing. There's nothing more that makes me happy than eating, venison. I love fresh venison, and so, yeah, I'd love to kill a big buck. But also, I'd love just like you're saying. I'd love to get out there and, get out and sit in a tree, even if I don't see a deer. Just being in the woods, it's almost like a meditation. Get away from everything. I might have my phone with, but most of the time if I'm on my phone in a tree, I'm looking at my spot on Onyx, looking, okay, and I see deer moving. Okay, where are they coming from? Why are they coming from there? Where are they heading? What's around? That, how can I make this spot better? How can I move through this area? And kind of, I guess I was doing more of observation sits,
because you weren't targeting a specific deer or a specific spot or a specific feature,
right?
But I think that's kind of like a rabbit hole, that we kind of took down about, where we are and kind of what drives us and how we're going to use this scouting seminar to move forward. But one of the things that I think is interesting about that is, wouldn't you think that would be like the last thing that you would have expected to come out of the Hunting Beast seminar, right? Is that you just sat down with a guy that has killed, a lot of big bucks. I mean, trophy class animals. And wouldn't you think that you would come out of there saying like, oh man, I gotta go kill these big bucks. Now, it wasn't like that was pounded into us.
Not at all.
This was not this is how you kill big bucks deal. This was saying, these are the spots that I hunt. This is why. This is where the big bucks live. And you can take that information and fit it into your hunting style however you see fit. Now, granted, I would say that the people that shows up for these seminars are the people that are trying to improve. Or, I mean, obviously you don't go there thinking that you know it all.
No.
You go there thinking like, fuck, I don't know anything. And then you get there and you're like, man, I'm not that far off. You know, I think for myself, a lot of the things that I'm doing is, and what's odd is how everything is related. So we went and did this swamp marsh bedding seminar, whatever. I don't know, workshop, I guess. But I gleaned off a lot of information that I can use hunting like farm fields. And like some of the other areas where I'm hunting, it's like, okay, this is what I need to be doing. This is how I need to be approaching it because of the way that bucks bed and deer bed. And it's not necessarily intuitive until somebody slaps you in the face with it and says, okay, look, this is the way that it works. And this is how. And I doubt that there was anybody that was there at any point that didn't see something while we were walking around and went, you know, that one time when I was hunting in this spot and this happened.
Now I know
why.
Right.
You know? And I think for myself, a lot of the stuff is I was going in like too far. And not that I was busting out these deer like while I was getting up the tree, because that's what, you know, Dan was talking about. It happened to Mario in a couple spots and he showed us why. But I think that I was just going in too far and busting them out on my way in. And that's one thing he didn't really talk about. We didn't talk a whole lot about access. You know, we didn't talk about like access, speed, direction, kind of why. I mean,
we did a little bit, like he was talking about how when he's cutting through the marsh, you know, through the cattails, he's like, you know, he's had other hunters walk up to him in the marsh, like the squirrel hunter, or there was another one, and he didn't even hear it. You know, and I'm guilty of this. Like that's one of the things when I got out like last fall, I'm out there walking and I start getting out in them cattails and I'm like, damn, I'm making all kinds of noise. I'm going to blow everything out. And he's like, you can get away with a lot more than what you think. You know, so the cattails absorb a lot of that sound, and the deer make the same sound themselves. So, you know, they're making noises they're walking through. Of course, if you're walking up to one in a bed that's, you know, 10 feet away, you're going to bust them out. But, you know, it just, like I said, it just put it all into like perspective. Like, all right, don't be afraid to get out there and do it. You know, I mean, now you have his Marsh DVD. Mm-hmm. So tell me, how did it, I mean, obviously you watched it, went through it, because I know you've been putting a lot of that stuff into your, you know, your hunting repertoire or whatever you want to call it. But watching a DVD and then going to a seminar, how do those two compare?
Well, the DVD, it shows you and it breaks it up on, like, so they get into those spots and a lot of those spots where we were, and then they'll show a hunt or they'll show, basically they'll show a hunt and they'll show deer movement, and then they put a map on there and then they draw a wind direction and access, and this is where the deer was. But it's completely two-dimensional. Right. And you know as well as I do, because, I mean, we talked about it on the way over here, was like when you're, you know, because we're talking about, you know, making more videos and trying to put stuff out there, and there's this like creative element to a video, but like no matter what, it's very difficult, or unless you're very, very good at it, to tell that story from like, and get the big picture from, because you're not looking at all of the like little features. And so in this case, a lot of the hunts that are on Dan's channel, a lot of the hunts that are in that video took place on this property. And so now there's more to draw from, because like I said, there's the amount of things that you walk by.
Right.
And
that was
the amount of things that
we would have got hung up on in the past.
Right. And that you can't show in a DVD, because when you show a video, if you start showcasing all these rubs, no matter the size, it looks like that's what you're focusing on. You can't focus on a rub and be like, that one doesn't matter, because up here is
right.
a little faint trail that leads out to this bedding that has all the rubs way out there. And to put the actual distance in there, to, like I said, no matter how big your TV is or whatever, the ability to paint that picture with that broad of a stroke to give you the full effect. And another thing, one of the...
Well, back to that point real quick, because one spot we were walking down, we seen a ton of rubs, and we just, like I said, walked by them. Another spot, we actually got down into the marsh, and we come up on a enormous rub. I think you got pictures of it, right?
Yeah.
So we'll post that on our page and stuff. But if I would have seen that, I would have been, holy shit, this is the spot. This tree is like a good 8 inches or larger.
It's a basketball-sized tree.
Yeah. And it's rubbed up, and then the branch above it's rubbed up, and he looked at it, he's like, that's a little buck. It's not very high. He goes, I just keep on walking. And then also the spot that it was at, he's like, this is not where you'd want to set up.
And then earlier in the day, we came up to a rub that was on a tree maybe 1.5 inches in diameter, out in one of these beds. And it was 6 inches long, but it was at Dan's shoulder height.
We have a picture of that too, don't we?
Yeah, I think I got it on the video. But
yeah.
He says, now this one is one, because he's like, it doesn't really matter where the tine length is or anything back behind it on this tree. He's like, this is high.
This is a big deer.
Yeah. But so that stuff that is very difficult to, I would say, to put into perspective on the DVD. And then, like I was going to say, so there was this one point where he was showing this bowl, and he was explaining how the wind works in it and how the deer bed out there and all of this stuff. And one of the other guys that was in the seminar asked me if I looked at that and just immediately recognized it as a bowl. And I was like, well, yeah, just because of the way that everything laid out. And I would say, on Onyx, this is how you look at it. But one of the reasons why I knew that it was there already is all these cattails were frozen over, and right through the center of it, a tornado had gone through, and you could walk out into the absolute center of this cattail marsh. I have no idea how many acres the marsh itself how many acres of cattails there were there. A lot. But you could get a 365-degree view where if you were there anytime when it wasn't frozen,
we got an extra 5 degrees in there, right?
What's that? Yeah. You could go all the way around. 360, one for every day. Yes, yeah. But
sorry, guys.
It's been a long couple days. But regardless, you could get the full view of this, and it's frozen. If you were in there in June or November, you would have been waist deep in muck.
If not
if those cattails weren't laid down, then they would have been over your head. So, and we've talked about my experiences just trying to go through the middle of CRP or cattails or any of that other bullshit. You get in there and you can't see. But now on this day, you could stand in the center of that marsh and get a full look all the way around, and you could see where all these points came down and where these ridges came up, and how everything kind of laid out going back down into this. And you can show that on a map, and you can say, okay, they bed here, bed here, bed here. And you can see, maybe on Onyx that you could say that there was deer trails, or the wheels on the spoke coming out from this bedding area or that. But to get down in there and then see why, and see like how thick everything is, and I think that those are some of the main takeaways of DVD versus being there, outside of the fact of, you also don't get that the question and answer portion on the DVD.
Yeah.
And you can try and relate it. You can ask, say, hey, in my area I have this, and this. Have you ever encountered this? Because it kind of lays out similar to this. And then it just tells you, how he would break it down or whatever. So it's just one of those things where those types of things would make one more valuable than the other, the difference, or however you want to. You've watched a lot of the YouTube, you've watched the Hunting Public, so to some degree, this can kind of also relate to parallel what we did elk hunting, right? Because we watched all of the elk hunting, everything, but we couldn't get out there and see it.
Right.
And then you went out there and saw that. I mean, how do the two differ from you watching YouTube videos and watching, Dan break things down on there, or just watching the hunts?
Yeah, it's definitely a whole nother ball game. I mean, when we got out there, you're talking about that little bowl, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, as we're walking up, and there was guys asking different questions and stuff, and he got into the point, I don't know if he talks about this, I know I've heard him talk about how, like, as the thermals in the evening, as if you're sitting close to a body of water, that water is warmer than the air in the evening, and it'll rise up and it'll actually pull the wind towards that body of water, out towards their bedding area. Looking at that spot, I'm like, okay, yeah, he's pointing out where the buck beds are, or where the bed, the deer beds are. And I would have probably screwed it up, because I would have got closer to the edge and tried to hunt that,
Mm-hmm.
Where he's like, what he does is he stays back off the edge, because then he gets away from that thermal effect. And he still has, this little area, the way it's set up, there was the marsh, there were some hardwoods, and then it was probably 100, maybe 80 to 100 yards deep of the hardwoods, and then it went out to a field. And he's like, the deer come up, they get up out of their beds, and then they come out into that hardwoods, and then they kind of stage in that area, and then they get out to the edge of that where the field is, but they don't ever the young deer, the immature bucks and does, they'll walk out into that field, but he's like, the mature bucks won't. They won't step foot out into that until it's dark. So he's like, and like I said, there was a couple guys like, why are you sitting back there, or where would you sit? He's like, I'm going to sit back there because I know that they're going to come in here and they're just going to mill around, and I'm going to most likely get an opportunity to sit or get a shot. But if I'm up close to that water source, there's a potential of that thermal effect pulling that out, and then the way the wind swirls in that bowl, it's just going to circulate it out, and they're going to, at some point in the evening, they're going to get your scent, and then they're going to wash out, go out the back door or whatever. So, that right there, just being able to question them and get that information, firsthand is it. I mean, yeah, I've heard it in his videos and stuff, but like I said, I would have got too close.
Well, and that's, I was one of the guys asking questions on that, now that you say that, because he said if I'm up, there was a rub line that went maybe like 30 yards, 20 yards maybe from the edge of the marsh. And it was, right there was relatively open. I mean, you know, and
Yeah.
he had just got done saying, in open hardwoods, if you find big rubs, you know, bucks don't make those
until after dark.
Until after dark. So I would have said that, well, that's pretty open. That maybe constitutes open hardwoods. It was paralleling the marsh edge. So in these bedding, or I mean, as Frank likes to say, when you have like a high density of rubs, so whether it's like, I don't know what those kind of like bushes are, but there'll be like clumps of these trees that come up and they'll just be all shredded up or whatever.
Right.
And when it's like right, a whole bunch of them in an area, you know, Frank always says, you know, that deer spent a lot of time right here. Mm-hmm. So whether that was in the evening or whenever, I mean, that would be proximity to where you think they're bedding. But this rub line paralleled the edge of that marsh. So it showed you direction of travel, but it didn't really show me that they spent a whole lot of time there. And so I would have tried to set up closer to that using Dan's ideals by saying, okay, well, if I think they're bedding out there, right, and they're going to come up here, and there was trails. I mean, we walked up on a trail right to that area. So I would have set up maybe right on those rubs and try and shoot them when they came out of the marsh. When in reality, the thermals would fuck you, but by being up higher, he was shooting to that rub line, and that was actually a rut transition area.
Right.
And those bucks were just cruising that area. And what he said was, and this is something that I've never heard on any of the podcasts or videos or anything. And maybe it's just like my personal oversight, but of like trying to think about when the rubs were made. So were they early season, were they extremely fresh, whatever. I always thought about that in terms of hunting a hot sign when it's hot, right?
Right.
So that's where the deer are in the area. Instead of saying this is rut sign, so this is a rut travel corridor, because when you talk about, he was talking about, you know, these rubs only pop up here in these certain times of year, and it's not a direction of travel. It's just you know, they spend a lot of time there. So it may be a bedding area for the rut and the rut only, and it's because it's in between two doe bedding areas, right, or something like that. So they're just camping out there waiting for, you know, something, doe to go into heat. I never really I mean, obviously you think about, well, this one happened in November, this one's fresher, it's November now, I'm going to hunt that. But never thinking about it year over year.
Right, putting it in the bank, like, okay, now this spot, I'm not going to go in there because I didn't see the fresh rubs until November, until like the rut. Mm-hmm. Or I got in there late and all the rubs, you know, they were from this year, but they're dried up, so they're from early season. So, okay, well, that was more of like their summer pattern, going to food source, whatever, and they might, you know, moved on to their rutting area now. Or, you know, there were still fresh rubs. I mean, here we're the beginning of February, and there's still fresh rubs out right now. I mean, shit, half the deer, I'm sure most of them don't even have horns left. I mean, so they were pretty recent, but, you know, so that was like, you know, I've heard him talk about this, you know, he likes to hunt the early season when they're still in their summer pattern. And then he likes, number two, he likes to hunt late season when they're back into their, you know, their feeding pattern. And he's like, especially in the evenings, they really get back onto that. They're much more patternable in the late season when they're getting back. They're trying to put that fat back on. They're trying to get ready for the rest of the winter, and they're on a food source. So, I mean, that right there, that's all part of, you know, the late season, in-season scouting, late season scouting, you know, off-season, whatever, you know, like right now going out there and looking at it like, okay. And we could still, he pointed it out in another spot where He's like, all right, look at this rub right here. This rub is still, good. And it's orange brown. That was a fresh rub. But that one right there is still from this season. He's like, so that's telling me that they're moving through this area pretty much throughout. So just
one of the things that he couldn't have staged any better was when we first got down in there and he was showing us where he had missed that deer on his very last hunt there when he was hunting on the ground. He said, okay, we're going to walk out here. I'm going to show you where the beds are. And so we're looking at the beds, and then we walk up to another set, and he's pointing out, and then see that willow tree way out there, that dead one? There's deer bedded over there. That's where they would be bedded. And I swung the camera over there, and I was zooming in just to make it, and then 3 deer were running away. It was oh shit, he's back. He's back.
So yeah, that right there just, tells you the knowledge that he has. I mean, he's like, yeah, I could go out there and say that, oh, yeah, there's deer bedded over there, and I could just be full of shit where he's pointing it out, and all of a sudden there's actually deer popping up as we're doing this workshop. So it is,
That's one thing that I don't know, they went through there and scouted the whole thing yesterday also. But I was kind of surprised, I guess, that we didn't see more deer running around out there. I mean... Yeah,
they're also, when we pulled in the parking lot, there were rabbit hunters and their dogs all blew through there too, so...
Yeah, that probably didn't help. But, yeah, I would recommend anybody who wants to improve their hunting, if you have the opportunity to get over there and to do one of his workshops. And I believe he's doing others, farm country and hill country workshops. And I mean, hell, even for us, I would say it would be something that would be worth going and doing, because you're going to pick up something no matter what.
Right.
And I believe that, even more so than hunting to a degree, we say, every time you go out and hunt, you should learn something, and you need to figure that out, what that's going to be. The amount of learning you could take away from this is, more than a couple seasons worth, because you're actually getting to sit there and see the sign and hear what happened, when, how, why, versus just seeing it on a video or something like that, whether it was an isolated incident or any of those.
Yeah, I'm just kind of beating a dead horse here, but it's really it's gonna put it in perspective. If you've watched any of, just even if it's YouTube videos, or even with the hunting public and stuff, how they talk about the bedding and getting into transition areas and stuff, and you might be dabbling in some of that and going out and doing some of the scouting and and seeing some of this, but you're kind of not putting it together. For you to come over and do this workshop is worth every penny. It's worth every second of your time to come over, and it will definitely make you a better hunter. It'll put it in perspective.
One thing I wanted to say that I also need to work on, and we didn't really cover it. It wasn't part of the day. He didn't say this is what you need to do, but he had mentioned in some of the things when he was younger, and keeping very good notes. And I've heard that from a lot of different people who are
consistent killers.
They have Jason Campbell for sure, but a lot of the different guys will have all these notes where they write down like when they go out and scout, what they saw, what they broke down. And just a quick shout out. I don't know if John's seen it, but the Whitetail Experience, Byron and Dave sat down and did a video podcast that they put on their YouTube that talks about like their scouting and kind of what they do. Definitely need to check that out because it's some great information. And it's another one of those kind of like, it would be you would be remiss if you didn't check it out because it's just regular guys just like us, but that consistently kill big deer by going in where nobody else wants to go.
So not quite like us. I mean,
no, they're just like us, except for they're doing those things.
Right.
Yeah. So we are regular guys that aren't doing those things, but we've consulted about it, and we're thinking about trying it this year. But no, like keeping like solid notes and saying like what you found.
Keep a logbook. I mean,
yeah, but that seems like such a fucking like, oh yeah, that's all you got to do. Just keep a logbook. Like, no, I mean, it's just like
time.
video in your hunts. Like,
yeah,
you just bring a camera and you just video stuff. Like it seems so simple, but I think it just needs to be added to your routine. It needs to be part of the process.
Right. You know, another a way you can kind of do it too, though. I mean, with the digital age right now, right, and OnX and everything, what you can do is when you take a picture, say you take a picture of a rub, right? You got a timestamp, time, date, and then if you wanted to take it one step farther, you could actually pull up your weather at the time, right? Everyone's got their smartphones with, and take a screenshot of that. Create a folder on your phone for scouting and have that, okay, this is what I've seen. Then you can have notes too where, I seen this, I seen that, the direction, and then you already have a picture of like what the weather conditions were like. And if there was other, like a side note, I mean, say I'm hunting Manistee County and the closest town is Manistee on my weather map, and it's a ballpark of it, but then I could make a note and write down, well, the wind was coming out of the southwest more, you wouldn't have to have a actual pencil and paper logbook, unless you're old school, but I mean, there's definitely a ton of resources out there that you could do it, make it a little easier if you're more digitally inclined.
So what are you going to do? How are you going to keep your logbook? Is that what you're going to do?
That's what I've been kind of thinking, because I've always got my phone on me, and I can, even like when I'm doing jobs and stuff, that's what I've been doing. I've been, I take down all my hours, and I'm taking photos of the stuff that I need to get, remember, because, I mean, I'm getting old. I can't remember shit from one minute to the next, but if I take a picture of it and I have it in there, I'm like, oh yeah, did I take a picture of it? Oh yeah, I can go back. What was on my list? So that's what I'm kind of pointing towards.
See, I feel like I'm more of a pen and paper type guy, but I do also think that leaves you an out, right? Because you're not going to go without your phone, or it'd be rare.
Right.
But it'd be like, well, I forgot my pen and paper, so...
Well, you could even take your notes on your phone and do some of that stuff, and then when you get back, then sit down when you get a chance and write it out in your logbook. That way you have a hard copy that you're never going to lose, because everyone loses a phone now and then.
But that's one of the things that that's the way that I learn things, is by writing them down, because then I know that I did it. I think that so much stuff in my phone is like, yeah, just take a screenshot of that, and yeah, you can reference it later, but I'm not
imprinted in.
I'm not organized, Yeah. So, I don't know. So, overall takeaway for like, what 3 things are you gonna go home and be like, this year for this season from this workshop specifically, are you going? What's gonna change?
Number 1, and I'm guilty of this. I'm going to go out and find way more spots, because like he was saying, he might hunt a spot 1, 2, max 3 times in a season. And so that's telling me, like in the bowl area, it might be on the southwest point one night or one set, and then it might be on the northeast, 2 sets. But then now that spot's done. So, we have a ton of public land. That's all I hunt. I'm just going to have to go out and start putting in time and getting more spots than what I have now. That's my number one thing. And getting out there and actually getting off my ass, because I talked about it for the last 2 years. I need to do more off-season scouting. I got to get out there and do it, because everybody knows how that feeling when you get into season, like, damn, if I would have just done this, I wouldn't be, kicking myself in the ass. Now it's too late. Now I'm in season scouting. But, when you go to a new spot or go out of state, you might only have a week to go out and hunt. Well, obviously, that happened with us in Ohio. We went down there the first year, and it was like a learning curve. But we went back second year, third year, and we're, if we kept doing it, we would have had the time, and then we would have been able to consistently, I think, kill big bucks. But, at home, I guess we kind of get lazy, because I can just go out any time, pretty much, instead of, driving 8 hours to hunt out of state, pay, higher price for a tag and all that. You're going to invest more time.
Stakes are higher.
Yeah, stakes are higher. So I guess I get a little complacent around the house and like, I know this spot. But then you get out there, and next thing you know, you got a guy moving in on you because you watched Dan Infalt's, DVDs, and he's got Onyx, and like, oh, fuck, now he's in my spot. It's public land. This isn't your spot. But, so I guess the more eggs in the basket you have, the better off you are. So I guess that was 2.
Mm-hmm.
3. I guess that just kind of blends all together as 3, but just pay more attention to the, what I'm doing out there. And I guess lay off because I'm guilty of it too, seeing sign and getting hung up on it. Whether it's up in a flat or, like, man, look at this rub line. And it's so tempting to just like, well, I'm going to sit here and see what happens. And then that's a wasted hunt, basically. If you're not close to the bedding area, you might get a young buck. If that's what you just want to get some deer under your belt, give it a shot. I mean, you're going to probably see something, there's sign there, but you're most likely not going to see that mature buck. So I guess those are my 3 things. What's your top 3 takeaways?
I think the whole idea of being confident and having no wasted sits, I guess. And I did that 2 years ago very well and was very successful and was so completely focused on, but that was all in-season scouting and knowing the areas. So I was able to get on deer that I didn't know were there. I was able to get in there and get in on the sign. And so what I'd like to do is try and focus on particular spots, not general areas, but like this tree or that bed, or I want to find more of that type of hunting space, because I think that's where we and myself get complacent, and I think that's why. And I think personally for me, I think Frank does that to me because he just says, we're just going to go hunt the runways. We're just going to hunt the spots, the areas. Just find runway, get up a tree. You'll kill a deer. And he's got a lifetime of success doing that. And as...
and he's happy.
Oh, yeah. And that's not to say that I'm not either. It's not to say that I'm unhappy. And as much as I say, well, I'm the world's worst bow hunter, that really is a kick in the nuts to somebody who's never killed a deer with a bow or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but I just feel like I'm ready to move up to that. That's my next progression, is finding a spot like that, where that tree in September or in February or in July, and I say, I'm going to kill that. I'm going to kill that. And I've not come to that yet, but that's when it's going to happen. And it would mean just as much to me, I think, if I went and I said that tree and a frickin' basket rack 6-point stands up, because all it did is just validate that spot. Now,
that might be the most mature buck in the area too.
Whether it's the caliber of deer that I'm looking for or whatever, that's where I'm not. That's one of my other goals for the season. I don't know that I necessarily took it away from this, but is to locate more big deer. And I think what I did take away is that an observation sit doesn't have to be a sit. It just has to be like that scouting that they talk about. Because I'm like, fuck, man. How are these guys getting out there all the time and doing these observation sits and doing all this scouting and shit? Well, I did the same thing. Like, I got that big property by my house. If I couldn't hunt it before the time change, I was the asshole that was driving through there every single day with my binoculars, trying to see where these deer were coming out and trying to figure them out. And I knew like full well that I wasn't going to hunt them, but I didn't see anything that I was like, holy shit, I got to get in there and hunt it,
But if you would have,
but if I would have, it would have changed my thing. But I would like to move into that. So, locating the exact tree, the exact spot, and the exact why,
and when,
and yeah, but that might take, another sit, another year, another 2 years, or whatever. And then targeting, doing more of that in-season scouting, even preseason scouting or whatever, but just knowing that instead of focusing on like big rubs and, it'd be cool if everywhere I went there was those, but where I do see trails and crossings and stuff, because I'm like, how can I go up to these spots and just sit on the road and glass like every frickin' day? Well, I can't, but if I drive by there every day and there's new tracks every day and then a big one shows up, okay, now we're getting somewhere.
Now you have an idea.
And so where before I was just kind of wandering around, to do that more purposefully.
Yeah, hunt with a purpose.
And like I said, but the purpose is to a degree different, because before, like, it was like, I'm just going to go find an area with deer and hope a big one walks by. Instead of saying, all right, which one of these areas has the best idea for big things? And then from today, what I took away was just the way that wind-based bedding. I've got so many spots where I know that there should be good deer, but I just never really figured out how to, like, where to move in on them or whatever. So, he was talking about how deer use slashings. And I got 15 different properties, spaces where there's just been clear cuts and there's a ton of slashings.
Yeah.
And, so now to go in there and be like, all right, well, on the downwind side with a predominantly whatever wind, and do a lot more. That's one thing I guess we didn't talk about that I'm going to do is when I get to these new areas, just walk the edges. That's something that I think that was huge that we didn't even touch on.
Yeah.
Because that's the way we moved through this entire property.
Yeah, that's what like the number one thing he said. This is how I break the property down is I get in, I eliminate spots where the deer are not going to be, like the big wood lots and stuff, and then I walk the edges, the transition lines, and look for the sign and where they're moving. And that's how he narrows that property down.
Yep.
And if he sees big tracks or, old rubs, new rubs, whatever, then he's going to key on that area.
And so that's one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to take these areas that I already hunt or that I'm already somewhat familiar with and then work those transitions where I think that there's going to be deer and then start to narrow down and then just kind of go back through all of that. So walk those transitions, find the areas where I think it's going to be the most beneficial, then pick a tree where I think it's going to work, and then hover around that area until I see the sign that I'm looking for.
Or blow them out. No.
Well, if that's the case, then at least I verified that there was a big one in there.
Right.
And then now maybe I just say, screw it, I'm not coming back here. I blew it out really bad, so I'll hang a camera in there and come pick it up after the season and see if it lived.
And this kind of, he was talking about cameras and stuff. And he said he was guilty of this, himself in the past, years ago. And I actually seen some of this. One of the spots that I've been wanting to scout, I had my pins. I'm like, there's an ag field. There's a big, ravine going down to the marsh, creek. I'm like, and I put pins. I'm like, okay, this is where I think there's going to be some buck beds. Get down in there. Sure enough. And then I found it like, oh man, look at this bed. It's like, sat down in it, checked it out. I'm like, this is definitely, what he's talking about. And then I stand up and look around, and all of a sudden, 20 yards away, there's a tree stand. But the bed was there, but it didn't have fresh sign in it. So someone come in, did the same thing, but then they hung a tree stand within 20 yards of the bed. So anyway, but back to the cameras. He's like, cameras are great, but when you find a buck bed, people are guilty of sticking a camera right on the buck bed and like, oh, I want to get the pictures of them in their bed. And he's like, you get one picture. And that mature buck walks in, and it's a picture of him looking at your camera, and then he's gone. So put them on the trails. He said they're more tolerant of a camera being on an exit or entry trail back off away from it. They're not tolerant if they're in their, right in their bedroom. They're going to know it's there. So that was another big, I would have been guilty of that. Oh, I found beds. I want to verify that this is a mature buck or any kind of buck using it. Put a camera on it. Oh, get a picture of it, and then gone. So I just blew that bed out. But so that was another big, a piece of information that I really thought was important.
Yeah, and it's really hard to put the experience into like from our perspective, this is all it is. I mean, there was so much more information that was more eloquently put, but
we started out at 8:30 this morning until 6:30, and it was nonstop conversations and questions. I mean, like I said, we sat at the restaurant, afterwards and talked about, not just buck bedding, but all kinds of hunting, and I mean, just so much information, and that's what everyone gets. And he said that to us. He's like, when we get done, we're gonna go back. He had we went to the restaurant, had a excellent meal, all set up for us. And he's like, I encourage any questions. He's like, I will stick around until everyone is done talking. He's like, I will hang out and answer any questions and bullshit with you guys until you guys are ready to leave. And it came down to 3 of us out of was there like 13 of us today?
There's
Well,
maybe like 5 of us there, but yeah.
No, I mean, there was 15 of us in the whole group.
Oh yeah. And just sat there.
I wasn't
talking.
counting myself, so there was 4 of us at the end. And the kid left. The youngest kid left a few minutes before, so there was 5. But even when we walked out, I seen the other 2 guys. They were still talking to him in the parking lot some more.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of our breakdown of our experience at the Hunting Beast Scouting Workshop. I would recommend it. I mean, like I said, I've been trying to get over there for like the last 3 years, and finally we were able to go. And I mean, hell, like I said, if it's in the cards and one pops up for farm or hill country or something, because sometimes they're like in Minnesota or like in other parts of the country and shit. Like, but I mean,
maybe we can invite him to come do one in Michigan with us.
Yeah. I mean, we can invite him. We can certainly do that. But whether he shows up or not is a whole nother story. But he's done a Michigan one in the past.
Yeah.
So, but I think you got to have an idea. You have to have an area that you can break down. Like, so,
yeah.
Maybe if you get a spot where you're familiar with and you can bring him in, because that's the beauty of this place here in particular, is he's been hunting here for so many years that he knows it backwards and forwards. So it's not a this is what I would do in the situation. He's like, this is what happens and this is what I actually do,
Right. And like when they did the public land challenge in Michigan this year, even in last year, they've proven that they put their knowledge, boots on the ground, they put it to the test. And both the public land challenge, Dan's team has come out like with the best buck or with the kill.
Mm-hmm.
The hunting public guys did a great job. They had some opportunities on some nice bucks too. I mean, so I'm not putting one over the other, but
well, it's not a competition.
Exactly. It's a informational overload for everybody that wants to watch it. But last
drives home the point that it works.
It works, anywhere. And they actually, we talked about this before or while it was going on or whatever. I think we talked about it on the podcast where originally they were supposed to go to like Jackson County, and then the location got leaked out, and so they had to switch up. So that was even more of a test to it, because now all of a sudden, right before they're leaving, they had changed up areas and had to go to a totally different area. So then they had to, and then when they got there, a lot of people, I probably would have been like, oh, I mean, it was nothing but rain. The water was so high, like a ton of the area was flooded out. And so I would have been like, fuck, it's screwed. We can't hunt where, the deer should be. But he put his knowledge to the test there, and they figured it out. And like you said, I think you actually asked him a question while we were doing the workshop. What about like when you want to go to Michigan? He's like, well, I looked at it, and then I knew where the deer should be, and we just worked our way in, and we got it done. Of course, Joe killed the buck. It wasn't like in the complete. It wasn't in the. It was in the high ground there because it was so wet. But just I don't mean to just keep beating the drum about it, but the information that he gives out, it's invaluable.
Yeah, and so like I say, that's what I was just trying to get at, is that if you have the opportunity to get to one of these seminars, I would certainly do it, because the one thing, and John and I talked about this, and we've said it before, almost on the other side of the spectrum, but this is like one of the rare occasions, like where anybody
could do this, right? So all you have to do is sign up for the workshop and you can come. It's not like an exclusive thing. B,
you don't have to be famous like us.
but
Complete joke.
This is this is public land that you could hunt. You know, he asks that if you're from the area that you don't go do it because these are places that he actively hunts. But this is not, I mean, in reality, think of another person on the planet who has killed that many trophy class deer. And there's tons of people out there, and we talked about it at the restaurant back there, that you'll never know their names, that are incredible hunters and probably have better walls than Dan, right? But that's going to take you to their hunting spot for whitetail deer and show you how to kill them on this piece of public property that if you were an asshole, you could go there and hunt.
Right.
You know, whitetail guys don't do that. You know, that's not a thing. And public land guys are even more close to the vest. And it's just one of those rare occasions where you get the opportunity to go to somewhere where anybody could literally do this. And even if you said, well, we could go to the Drury's farm, or we could go to Lee and Tiffany's, or, I'm sure Bill Jordan's Realtree farms have great thing. Jeff Foxworthy's Tecumseh Ranch, right? Anybody could do that for the sum of money or resources or whatever. You know, this is a full-on public land. Like, here is exactly what I do, where I do it, how I do it. Now, when you get into Western hunting, you know, everybody out West wants to help you out because, for the most part, if you're starting out or you're trying to learn, you're not trying to kill a trophy class bull, you know. And I would imagine that a Western hunter who has a trophy unit or bulls in mind or whatever, they think that you're coming from wherever out east, South Carolina, Michigan, Maine. You're going to fuck it up anyways. Like, you're not going to kill that big buck, that big bull, you know. So come on out here. We'll get you on some animals, you know. We'll help you out as best you can. But it just doesn't happen in the whitetail world, at least not in my experience, and not so freely. Now, you know, there's people that have, you know, that you could have a mentor and somebody that takes you under their wing and they teach you and show you, and, you know, you have that relationship with them.
Right.
But that's a
rare occasion.
Anybody can do this, you know. You have the opportunity to sit down and pick the brain of, you know, the big buck serial killer. And I can't reiterate the fact that enough. Like, if you're serious about hunting and want to become a better hunter, like, it's something that you should really consider, right?
Yep.
So
do it.
But yeah, we are into Illinois here, and weather's cleared up, but I think that's pretty much all we got for this evening. So check it out. Go to the Hunting Beast forum and you know, read, listen. You know, there's so much information over there on this stuff, and, you know, we just got done saying how you can't get everything from the DVDs, but there's something to take away from the DVDs, from the forum, from, you know, these other regular guys, and there is so much information out there.
It will make you a better hunter.
So definitely check it out. Thanks for listening.
See you.
sit down.